Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Cam.
Call the buzz. We're calling.
Take him back! Take him out!
You die in prison as well.
I am truly sorry and will forever regret my actions and will do all in my power to never act in a way that would harm others ever again. Thank you, Your Honor.
First up, we're in Idaho Falls, Idaho, for the sentencing of Brian Johnston. The 50-year-old former high school teacher pleaded guilty to felony stalking of a 26-year-old former student who he'd recently been dating. Johnston was accused of violating a protection order filed against him by following the woman in public, leaving her harassing messages, and entering her home while she was gone, including an alleged incident where he urinated on her bed. Facing a possible 5 years in prison, Johnson can be seen visibly shaking as he addresses the court.
Your Honor, I would like to take this chance to openly apologize for my actions in this case. I take full responsibility and full remorse and regret, not because I was caught, but that I allowed my perspective and judgment to be so clouded by a number of issues that I chose to act the way I did.
Johnston appears to become even more distraught when he apologizes to the victim, whose name has been protected.
And finally, most importantly, I deeply and sincerely apologize to for all anxiety, depression, stress, fear, and any other negative emotions and financial burdens which my choices and actions did cause. I sincerely regret and feel deep sorrow and accept full responsibility for that which I have done. I hope and pray that she will be able to heal from this and not have any lingering impact to her life. And will do all in my power to never act in a way that would harm others ever again. Thank you, Your Honor.
Before Judge Joel Tingey hands down a sentence, he tells the court there is much to consider when looking at Johnston's public persona versus his illicit behavior behind closed doors.
This is not a case of a career criminal. This is somebody who's actually very productive in the community. A role model, frankly, who did a lot of good things through his career. But I think when you look at a case such as this, where you're doing a sentencing, as you look at the conduct and the damage that was left in the wake of that conduct, which is extensive, frankly immeasurable, was subjected to basically living a hellish.
As part of the pre-sentencing report, the judge received numerous letters of support for Johnston, but he says this is a man with two very different sides.
As I say, this is a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde case. I get a lot of letters who really support Dr. Jekyll, but I'm sentencing Mr. Hyde.
After a brief pause, Judge Tingey makes his ruling.
The sentence on this will be 5 years, 1.5 mixed, 3.5 indeterminate.
As a condition of his sentence, Johnston was placed in a court-operated rider rehabilitation program that can significantly decrease his sentence if he receives intensive therapy and treatment behind bars before being reevaluated by the court. Johnston was released less than a year later after completing the program and was placed on probation for an additional 4 years.
There's no way on earth that I could have taken her life.
Next, we go to Buffalo, New York, for the sentencing of 40-year-old LaShawn Lewis. She was charged with second-degree murder in the death of her own mother. Latifah Lewis was stabbed over 40 times in her own home in 2005. Her daughter called police but claimed she had nothing to do with the crime. LaShawn was questioned but never arrested, and the case went cold for 12 years. But when a new team of investigators re-examined the evidence, they discovered drops of Latifah's blood on LaShawn's shirt and an earring originally found under the body, which they now believe belonged to LaShawn Lewis. Police offered no clear motive, but believed the two had an argument over money and LaShawn Lewis's drug use. Lewis, who was already in jail on an unrelated drug charge, pled not guilty. If convicted, she could face up to 25 years in prison. News of the arrest divided an already devastated family and came to a head at Lewis's arraignment. The case went to trial but ended in a hung jury. Lewis was tried again, but this time the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. At sentencing, Lewis continues to claim her innocence.
She was my best friend. She was my strength. There's no way on earth that I could have taken her life.
As friends and family offer impact statements, Lewis continuously interrupts.
She got her GED, she went and got her job, she made her life the best she could, and she was at a point in her life where she felt that it was some time for her to enjoy.
You didn't even know my mother. How could you say?
Burns gives Lewis the maximum, 25 years to life. Lewis is clearly unhappy with the sentence. As she leaves the courtroom, she sends a vile message to the gallery by spitting at them. Lewis is currently in a New York State prison and won't be eligible for parole until the year 2042, when she'll be 65 years old. Next, we're in Miami, Florida for a bond hearing. And wait till you get a load of this defendant. This is 29-year-old Lawrence Sullivan, a.k.a. the Miami Joker, a Florida native and a self-proclaimed tattoo model.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Sullivan.
Sullivan's appearance doesn't draw so much as a second look from Judge Maria Espinoza Dennis. But remember, this is South Florida, and this is no laughing matter. Still, he may be thinking, Judge, why so serious? Well, here's the answer.
Okay, you're charged with carrying concealed firearm, which, if convicted, has some serious consequences.
Sullivan's accused of pointing a handgun at passing traffic and was later arrested carrying a concealed .38 caliber pistol. Now in custody, he's declining service from the public defender.
You want the public defender's office to represent you?
I mean, you can represent me, but I'm trying to get bonded out on my own.
Well, they're there to help you, sir. You don't have a lawyer.
All right.
I mean, okay, so...
I didn't even feel like signing the paperwork. I'm really not moved for that.
Sullivan's asking for a pretrial release, but Judge Espinoza Dennis, who could be considered the Dark Knight in her black robe, isn't going to let him out so easily.
On a firearms charge, I'm not going to do pretrial. Setting standard bond, $5,000. Next case.
Lawrence Sullivan was later found guilty of carrying a concealed firearm and sentenced to 2 years probation, maybe proving the old adage that crime doesn't pay. Next, we're in Scottsville, Kentucky, for the case of 42-year-old Timothy Madden. 4 years earlier, Madden was arrested and charged with the rape and murder of a 7-year-old girl. The victim was watching her brother's youth football game and was abducted on her way to the concession stand. She was found in a nearby wooded area just 30 minutes later. Madden initially maintained his innocence, but less than 2 weeks before his trial was set to begin, he entered a guilty plea for the charges of kidnapping and murder. The plea was part of an agreement with the prosecution that they would not pay him going to trial. Madden also entered an Alford plea for charges of rape and sodomy, meaning he didn't admit guilt, but agreed there was enough evidence to convict him. Now, after 4 long years, the victim's family is finally able to address Madden before the judge hands down a sentence. But as the victim's mother starts to share her impact statement, Madden seems disinterested and turns to talk to his lawyer, an action that offends the victim's father.
Sir, that's the most disrespectful thing I've ever seen. Give us just a minute. We've had 4 years waiting.
Clearly angry, the victim's father demands that Madden and his attorney give his family this one small courtesy after their years of suffering.
You listen to him. No, you can look around all you want to. We've had 4 years waiting. You can let him listen to what she's got to say. Do you understand me? Do you understand me?
Mr. Dillon, Mr. Dillon.
I'm sick of it.
Mr. Dillon.
We've had 4 years. He can give her 3 minutes to say what she needs to say.
As courtroom deputies try and calm down the angry father, the judge calls for a recess.
If you'll escort Mr. Madden out.
You can't give somebody 3 minutes to say something?
recess at this time. If you'll please escort Mr. Madden.
Should have recessed 4 years ago.
It appears the situation may be diffused after Madden's removed from the courtroom and the victim's father's led away. But a mother's plea reignites emotions.
This is all we've asked. We haven't asked for
Not enough
anything.
respect.
That's when the victim's father sets his sights on Madden's attorney.
You're an attorney. You're paid by the taxpayers. You're paid by the taxpayers.
Seeing the escalating chaos in front of her, Judge Janet Cocker tries to gain control of the courtroom.
Absolutely. We're off the record. Ladies and gentlemen, stop this. All of you. Now.
That's all I ask for.
Now. This child deserves better than this.
After a 15-minute recess, the victim's mother is finally able to speak on behalf of her devastated family.
Because of you, we lost our baby girl. Our boys lost their sister. Before she was even 8 years old. You took her from us. Why did you do it? There is no reason that you could give. Was an innocent little girl who was at her brother's football game, playing with her friends just as she had done so many times before.
Timothy Madden was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Welcome back to Court Cam. A warning. The description of the crimes you're about to hear is graphic and may be disturbing.
I was reaching for my daughter, and he started whacking at my hand.
That's 32-year-old Brandon Bekonen. He's testifying at a preliminary hearing for 2 of the 4 defendants accused of viciously attacking him. The defendants are Devon Crawford, Sarah Oden, Alvaro Tito Oseguero, and Ivan Sandoval. A 5th suspect, Faustina Anaya, was arrested at a later date. The group is charged with a number of felonies, including kidnapping, aggravated assault, and mayhem, which is defined as any crime where a victim is maimed or disfigured. The alleged attack occurred when Bekonen and Sandoval, who were acquaintances, went to the home of Tito Oseguera, hoping to trade some items for drugs. As soon as Bekonen stepped inside, he was thrown to the ground. The reason for the alleged attack? The defendants believed Bekonen was working undercover with the police, an accusation that was untrue. Bekonen describes the horrific details from that night, which he claims were primarily carried out by Crawford.
What was said to you by him during the attack, if you recall? I get on the ground and not to move. He was tying my hands together.
Next, according to Bekonen, the defendants blindfolded him.
I was on my knees on the floor, and I had my hands behind my head. He had grabbed my cell phone, and he threw it on the floor, and he started smashing it. And then he rubbed a sharp object up against the back of my arm when it was above my head. And he said, if you like that, well, you'll get more of that here in a minute.
Next, Crawford and Sandoval allegedly walked Bekonen to his car, threw him in the back, and drove him to an open field.
What happened at that point? They asked me if I had kids, and I said yes. And he told me to reach out in front of me like I was reaching for my daughter. And he started whacking at my hand.
When you say whacking on my hands, what do you mean?
Chopping them up.
Could you feel some sort of weapon that he was using to hit you in the hands?
It sounded like an axe or a hatchet to me.
Okay. Do you know how many times he hit you?
I don't know. I don't know exact number.
What was being said during the time that your hands were being chopped?
This is what you knocks get.
Do you know who said that?
It was a kid that tied my hands together with long hair.
Was he the one that was doing the chopping?
Yes, sir.
The kid with the long hair Bekonen is referring to is Crawford. When he and others finally left, Bekonen begins to realize the extent of his injuries.
Slowly got up to me, pulling my blindfold off to get it wrapped around my wrist. And that's when I realized the only fingers I could use were my thumbs.
With the alleged attack over and his hands dripping with blood, Bekonen walked a half mile until he found a resident who called 911. Bekonen lost his left pinky finger, but doctors were able to salvage the rest of his hand. despite severe nerve and tendon damage. The 5 defendants all pleaded guilty to a number of charges. Crawford, to kidnapping and felony use of a weapon, was sentenced to 12 to 35 years in a state prison. Oseguera and Anaya pleaded guilty to second-degree kidnapping and received a minimum of 10 years. Odin pled guilty to aggravated battery and was sentenced to 2 to 15 years. And Sandoval, the one who brought Bakonin to the ambush, pleaded guilty to second-degree kidnapping. He's sentenced to a minimum of 3 years.
There is no remorse by the defendant. He continues to blame others.
Next, we go to Green Lake, Wisconsin, for the sentencing of Nicholas Toonstra. He was convicted of 2 counts of murder in the killing of his estranged wife, Melissa Toonstra, and her boyfriend, Justin Daniels. Melissa had recently filed for divorce from her husband and began seeing Daniels when Toonstra shot them both at this apartment complex.
She was located right outside on the sidewalk. Officers responding to the scene found the female in a pool of blood.
Investigators' first priority was not the suspect, but instead locating the Toonstra's 8-year-old daughter. They issued an Amber Alert and found the girl safe at her grandparents' home with her father. Police learned the suspect purchased the same type of gun used in the crime, and Toonstra admitted he was at Melissa's apartment the night of her death, although he claimed he left before the shooting. Toonstra was taken into custody and charged with stalking, 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pled not guilty. The trial lasted nearly a week, and after examining all the evidence, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. At sentencing, when prosecutor Andrew Christensen talks about Toonstra's abusive behavior towards his ex-wife, allegedly committed in front of his own daughter, it does not sit well with the defendant.
Witness the defendant abuse her mother.
I did not.
Be in recess.
I did not touch her hair. You only got pushed that one time and stuck her heel. That was it. That was the only error.
Several bailiffs removed Toonstra from the courtroom. When he returns, a calmer Toonstra offers a few words to the court.
I apologize for the outburst to the prosecution. It was a very aggressive and threatening stance and step toward the prosecution table.
Before Judge Mark Slade announces the sentence, Melissa's family provide emotional impact statements.
He murdered 2 people because his ego was bruised.
If you, Nick, loved Melissa like you said you did, why did you kill her?
Then the judge offers his own take.
There is no remorse by the defendant. He continues to blame others.
Toonstra sentenced to 2 life sentences with no chance of parole, but the judge allows him permission to see his daughter from prison. Toonstra continues to maintain his innocence.
There's a lot more truth out there, but I'll have to wait for appeals that people were not aware of.
Toonstra filed an appeal, but so far it has been denied. That's it for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.